Hello, happy Monday. This is Letty Garza with Epic Consulting, providing this space for the last 14 weeks now. This is week 14 for our continued conversations under Epic JEDI. We're reading Caste by Isabel Wilkerson and going through the chapters and having conversations about the topics and personal experiences to share on this platform. So this week, we're going to be covering chapters 27, 28, and 29, and all under sort of this theme about the price that we pay to have a caste system in the United States. It looks a little different here than it does in other places like India, or the way that it did necessarily look in Nazi Germany. So we still have to have the conversations and point things out and talk about how to make things better. So why don't we bring in our guests? I'll bring in Richard McCrow on first because he's been with me here since the beginning. You're an OG.
Well, I'm an OG, but that has nothing to do with this.
And then this week, big welcome to Mike Walsh. Thank you for joining us from, where did you say you were again?
I'm hanging out in San Diego down on the marina. For anyone who's familiar with the area, I'm over by Seaport.
Oh.
Or it's awful.
Center.
I am so jealous.
Place. No, you're supposed to say it's awful.
It's terrible. It's terrible. I've got gas lamp one way and Seaport Village the other way, and shopping and food. It's horrible. I've gained weight. It's horrible.
Yeah. You go over to Point Loma. What's the name of that Italian restaurant over there?
Ooh, Pomodoro. So good. Recommendation from us to everyone who watches
Little
this.
Italy.
If you're ever in the Point Loma area, Pomodoro.
Yep. A lot of great food over there.
So good.
Not that I had time to go see. I'm just saying, it's.
Yeah, you've been so busy.
It's all work.
No pleasure at all.
Hey man, you gotta eat. You have to eat. Before we jump into the chapters, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. I think that Keith Woolridge will sponsor us as long as we do this, and hopefully what I'm saying is true. He's listening or will watch this later, and he will keep donating books for us to share with students. We were able to donate some this time around, so that was great. I also want to share it actually feeds right into the first chapter that we're about, and I just came across this on Netflix because, well, I watch a lot of true crime stuff. I'm also interested in a lot of documentaries. So this came up as a recommendation on Netflix. It's called Alt-Rage, and I don't remember if it came out in 2018, but it's about the time leading up to Charlottesville. They're following Richard Spencer around and kind of sitting in on some of his meetings and rallies and leading up to that day, and then what happens after, and it seemed they were giving him a lot of opportunity to really talk about what he wanted to accomplish, so it seemed pretty balanced. It's hard to, I think, for someone like me, if I'm watching it and I'm watching what happened in Charlottesville and the night before and the chants and then the mayhem that happened during that march and protest, and then Heather Heyer being killed, it's hard to see what the other side is. But I felt like they were pretty fair in showing what happened on both sides. Just with the camera, like, this is what happened, and they just happened to be there. These people were making this documentary, and they happened to be following him around, and so you get a lot of a little bit of research, some background, and then following that figure around for some time leading up through and after Charlottesville, which is what we're going to talk about in this next chapter. So I thought I'd throw that out there, and I just watched that over the weekend or last week, so it just fit. Okay, so again, this is what we're going to be talking about over these 3 chapters, is sort of the different ways in which we pay a price for having a caste system in this country, building the country on the caste system, and then making sure that it stays in place, right? Chapter 27 is the symbols, called the Symbols of Caste. And I'm going to just kind of put out there at the beginning the question of what are some of these symbols. She describes a lot of them in details. But this idea of that Confederate symbols across the US since 1865 are kind of like the big, you can't miss those, right? Those are everywhere. Names of people, the statues, monuments, movies, schools, streets, laws, all of these things that sort of prove it's evidence that these symbols exist. As you were reading this, given maybe where each of you live, do you see these? Are you aware of these? Is there anything, maybe as a school board member, Mike, you could kind of talk about that if you feel comfortable. Richard, also an educator, if you feel comfortable, like what's in your system, what's in your school system, and where you live? Do these things come up? Do you see them?
For me, I don't see them a lot. Where I live up in Northern California, right? We're very rural, and I don't see. We don't have any the Confederate names, right? So, and now when I go home after reading this chapter and really listening and doing some of the work on it, I am going to give a little bit closer look. But I don't know of any that come to mind in all of Butte County. But what I do see, which surprises me, and I have no clue why or how, are the Confederate flags that roll constantly. And we've always had Confederate flags, and I know that became a very big thing over the last election or so. But I've seen Confederate flags for some time, and there's just a disconnect for me because as a kid growing up, I didn't think twice about it. It was like, you got a flag. It's a Confederate flag. Yeah, it's nice. And, I'm thinking of Mississippi or Mississippi State college football. I'm thinking of the Rebels of Mississippi. That's all I ever thought about it. And it wasn't until the last, years when we've had the controversy really flare up, and I've started to really wade into the conversation about whether or not the Confederate flags and monuments and things should be kept, that I've started to really think deeply about it. And having a son who serves in the military, it's a real disconnect for me now when I think about it that, wait a minute, you're right. These are the Confederate monuments of the folks who lost. And they're everywhere as if it's a part of our culture and our history that we should be proud of and celebrate their heroic act. Really? And I had to really stop and think about, wait a minute, these are the folks who they fought a war because somebody said people who look like me are not property and they're not your chattel and set them free. And they said, no, we will pull away. We will secede from the Union first. So for me, it's been over the last 5 or 6 years that I've really started to think deeply about it. And it's also coincidentally, and I don't know which led which, but it's about the time that I started learning about different atrocities that happened over the years, like the Tulsa massacre and other lynchings and things that happened. So for me, it's all of it came together at the same time, and it's left me questioning deeply, how did this become such an incredible part of our culture today that people still want to, rally for the lost cause? That's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
Yeah, I'm in the same sort of spot. I guess I wasn't really paying attention. And I mean, I've been to, what she named the one of them was the Robert E. Lee River in Idaho. And I just thought, I've been there, and I thought, I never thought of that when I was younger, or even that, I mean, I watched the Dukes of Hazzard and thought, this is a great show. It makes me laugh.
Oh my God.
But now I see it and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm appalled. But that, you're right, Mike, for me, that's the same thing. Probably the last, 3 to 5 years is where I really start paying attention. And now when I see the Confederate flag, I'm horrified. And like many of my colleagues, more and more are just saying, we didn't pay attention. It was just there. And you're right. The Mississippi rebels, things like that were just around, and it was natural. And I didn't think about it. I've been to Arlington too a number of times, and just knew that they had sort of confiscated the land from Robert E. Lee, and understood that part of it, and sort of chuckled about it. But then at the same time, you're visiting slave quarters on the compound, and why that didn't connect, I don't know. And when you mentioned before 5 years ago, Robert E. Lee, people that didn't know may have considered him an old American hero. And this is even up north, and just that bizarre, I don't know how that happened.
I'm with you.
She mentions Rommel in the book, and the discussion there, like, you don't see Germany erecting statues of Rommel, and it's like, wow, I really get this. I mean, I understand, and how embarrassing, in our nation that we continue, and people continue to push that this day. And you're right, drive down the street with the Confederate flag flying, and thinking it's okay. And so, yeah, but man, I can't believe that I wasn't even thinking about that 3, 4, 5 years ago.
And that's part of I tell folks all the time, when you see people who are woke just simply means you're now aware of something you never really realized. And most of the time it creates an outrage internally. Like I've been to Civil War battlefields. And I remember the first time I got to go out to Mississippi, I got to go to Civil War battlegrounds, and they've got, and I was wildly impressed with the notion and everything that went on. And there's, a ditch that's roughly 10 to 20 feet across. And the story around how they fought brother, cousins across this ditch and and I'm looking at this, and then I realized later, like you said, like my outrage was, well, wait a minute, I would have had a much different view of that Civil War cemetery and the battlefields and everything else, which is probably a more holistic and probably more realistic view of everything, if I had been aware of all these things, because I too have no idea at what point I became aware that Robert E. Lee was the bad guy, the leader of the bad guys. And even now, I'm sure there are some people out there, right, who hear me say the leader of the bad guys. And there's somebody somewhere like, wait a minute, he wasn't the bad guy. He just, and then they have to try and justify it. So I look at it now and I go, wow, how was I duped? And my outrage, my wokeness is not about the rest of the world. My outrage is with myself, that here I am, an educator, and I didn't know about that. And so all those aha moments for me are like, oh, how dare I not know these things? Oh, how could I be duped? Like, well, because again, what I love about the whole book is it really makes it crystal clear that the culture is something that in that moment, no one questions it. We just kind of go through it until somebody gets your attention and says, hey, this is the culture and it is not healthy. Do you realize why? And all of a sudden I have to challenge my own beliefs and things that I've thought. And so I'm loving my moments of awokeness now. I'm not nearly as upset with myself. I'm a little more gentle, not much, but a little more.
You know what, though? I think it would be a cool exercise to go back, to whatever, for me personally, to go back to whatever year it was that I was a junior in high school, probably, where you study American history, and look at what was being presented in those textbooks. Because Mike, right now, when you said it just seemed like it was lessons about this is what happened during the Civil War, and this guy fought on this side and this guy fought on this side, and it was just like, these are just the people who fought in the war. And yes, there was some conversation about slavery and reasons for the Civil War and all that, but when it came down to like what you're saying, the names did not spark any kind of, until way later for me, to think about who Robert E. Lee really was. There was I did not feel the same way about him that I felt about Hitler. That was for sure. I did not. I didn't have the same
Great
reaction
point.
to him. It was just like, this is what I'm learning about the Civil War, and they were all Americans. Like that's kind of how I felt about it.
That's a
So
great point. I love
I
that because
understand.
with Hitler, we all knew we everything about the news and everything because Hitler was coming after us as well. Everything was told
Right.
as it truth. It wasn't sanitized. No one ever painted
Mhm.
Hitler as a hero of the Germans. None of that. It was just literally Hitler, horrible guy. Look at all the atrocities to the Jews and the world war that he created out of his own anger. I've had him as a bad guy in my head forever, since day one that I remember ever hearing about him. But Robert E. Lee was an American who was a West Point graduate, and and I'm like you, was just sort of like, yeah, he was on that side, and we were on the other side, and our side won. Okay, yay! Can I go out to recess now? That was as far as I
Right.
ever thought about it. Right? I'm a little kid. Well, okay, there
Mhm.
was the north and the south fought. Which side were we at? I must have been, even though I'm in Southern California, at least had
Right.
the sense to go, well, they fought for slaves, so hey, I'm on the right side. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that was it. And then off to go play. And I've never thought about it until, like I said, it really started to hit me over the last 6 or 7 years, where my awakening has been. Wait a minute, what else was going on? Then now all of a sudden I'm really interested in history, and this is fascinating conversation. So I'm loving this, and I want to say, by the way, before I forget this, thank you for doing God's duty in taking this on, this whole story of caste, the book, and everything else. I mean, this is a work. All right. To anyone who hasn't tried to read through this already, hey, jump in here and read, because there's some learning to be done here. And I just think getting this conversation going, whether it's 10 people or 10,000 people, wherever it is, some of the conversations I've had lately with folks, it's important. It's critical. So thank you for taking this on for the whole. I think you've been reading this book now for 483 years, decades or something. It just seems
Yep.
like forever. You've given up all these Monday nights. So thank you for that.
Thanks for saying that, Mike. I think I love that you're saying that. I really appreciate it. And I think you're right that it's important, because I just had conversations with people on Friday where I commented that I thought that local educators should read Caste and kind of think about how they're handling themselves and handling the hierarchy of the education system in one of our local districts. And the response I got back from mixed company uh, was, that'll never happen. So it's like, okay, I'll try again later. That was kind of what it felt like. So I appreciate that. Yes, we will keep talking about it.
Isn't
I
that what
want
it
to.
takes? Oh, sorry.
What? No, go ahead.
I was going to say, isn't that what it takes? Because now I'm sitting here trying to figure out, how did I get these thoughts, and then recalling, and it's vague in my memory, but recalling, I went to a Catholic school, and recalling my third grade teacher, who was a nun, when we were talking about the Civil War and what happened in the South, and she never said that anybody was bad. She said, they were just trying to split the nation up. There was no reason for it. We didn't talk about slavery. They're just trying to,
Yeah.
and there was two sides going together. And this whole, now that we're looking at all the generals and everybody, this is an act of forgiveness, that we just sort of accept that things came back together and we're one happy nation again, under God, indivisible. And it's like, wait, what it just happened like that? like
But not liberty. But not liberty and justice for all, right? She left that part out.
Yeah.
And see, as you said that, this is perfect, because the workshop that I'm here in San Diego that I delivered today was about equity and using the lens of equity to figure out how do you make some changes. And the thing I spent the first 15 minutes explaining to everybody in the room, about 100 educators, and I said, before you start digging into the policies and changes, or like you said, Richard, some of the changes that we made in law, was that you first have to really figure out and think deeply about your mindset. Because if you don't challenge the mindset and the beliefs, then you can come up with all the great plans and laws that you want, but nobody cares. They just ignore it. And what you just described is a perfect example of that. They may have changed the laws about what you could or couldn't do, but they never changed my mindset or the heart of those individuals who were leading the charge to undo all those laws. And so, right away, we end up with the very next president after Lincoln, who just says, we want to make peace with the world. So never mind. It wasn't that big of a deal. Let's just move on. And we can just kind of forgive and forget. It's like, oh, no, time out. All you did was take the foot off of everybody, forcing them to do something different, which protected people, and just made it free reign again, and just come up with a new version of a law that doesn't violate the new laws that we have, the 13th Amendment, the whatever amendments. Let's just figure out a different way to do it, so no one worries about the Emancipation Proclamation. We don't worry about the 13th Amendment. We can just kind of move on and say, well, we've done something about it. We've changed the laws. But it didn't change a single attitude, really. It just left us back to scratch. So I think that was one of the greatest mistakes, was backing down. I can't imagine if someone had said, no, let's not hold the Nazis, hold them accountable. I'm like, that would have been a mess. And now we know, because we are living the results of that mess by never really dealing with it. Again, we had, all that stuff that we did, the 13th Amendment, and we talk about the Emancipation Proclamation, the 1860s. And then 100 years later, 1960s, we've got to create more laws. Like, come on. We're nibbling around the edges. That is incredibly slow incrementalism over 100 years, just so we can make another law that says, hey, acknowledge and pay attention to the law we made 100 years ago. And we're kind of doing that same thing today in a couple of ways. It's like we're chipping away at it a little at a time. So that's why I said it kind of goes back to my compliment to you, Letty, which was sincere, in that we've got to figure out how do we have these conversations all over the place, so people start to really think deeply and start to question, why am I flying a Confederate flag? I literally have no family from the South. What am I doing? So I'd love for the people to start to think about that. So
yeah, so what you're saying, this connection here to the book, this quote, in a bid to move on from tensions and put the matter to rest, President Johnson granted amnesty to Confederates. And I put move on from tensions and put the matter to rest in quotes because it's just an 1865 way of saying, there's no slavery today, or why are you so upset, or get over it. Let's move on to, it's the same. We're hundreds of years later and the same. So, I guess we can credit Andrew Johnson with sort of starting that trend of telling everybody to get over it because we're going to move on. The government says we're done, and now we're forgive and forget. And because we're built as a Christian nation, that should be, turn the other cheek, man. Just turn the other cheek. It's fine. Keep plowing forward.
We've won the war, so let's just forgive and put everybody moving on. And I think that's what's interesting, is the notion even of reparations. As we talk about that conversation that comes up, I think there are just so many analogies around how we would never, ever tell the folks who were wrong, look, just get over it, because we've already made peace with those who wronged you, and they've never spent a day in jail. Well, wait a minute. They were never held accountable. How did you hold them accountable? Why? How do we make peace? How? And wait a minute, you paid them to be nice? What? But I'm the one that was wronged. Why did you pay them? So everything about how that all played out, it's just, there's no way. The very folks who have said to me before, well, you were never a slave, I was never a slave owner, we need to move on, are the folks who will be the first to be outraged that they were wronged by someone today, and they're ready to go into a courtroom and say, no, I demand my justice, which I believe, isn't that why we had that one riot that took place at the Capitol? That one protest that took place at the Capitol in DC? That was because folks felt they had been wronged. And I get it. I'm like, hey, look, you feel like you've been wronged. You should protest. You should make some noise. You should make sure that other people know that you feel like you were wrong. So when they go do it, that's just that peaceful protesting thing. But when we say, hey, look, we were wronged and never paid for it, that promises never happened, can we just get over it? Like, oh, okay. So the amount of hypocrisy that comes through all this is amazing to me.
Oh, definitely.
And then to think that, what proves the caste system really was what it was meant to be, is when the Northerners started to commiserate more with the South than they did with the very people that they fought that war over. I just thought, okay,
Mhm.
this is a message right
Yes.
here.
Because that's what we've been saying. I mean, I think since we were reading So You Want to Talk About Race last time, was the idea that you're always white. You're always going to be white, and when it came down to it, if you're pushed into that corner, you're going to choose that. And so, as you know, we come out of the Civil War. White Northerners feel more of a kinship with the former enslavers than they do with the people that supposedly they were fighting to include as citizens of the country. This idea you touched on this a little bit, because of we're talking about monuments, and we've talked about World War II, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a second. But I wonder where else where else is it that the lost cause, that the losing party, that the one of the stains on the making of the country, that's who gets the statues and the monuments, and that then are able to sort of sell that generation after generation as sort of something they're owed, or respect that they're owed for fighting the good fight. Because usually people who win victories are the ones that are commemorated. So what is this idolatry that's happening
Now,
in this
here's what
Christian
makes
nation?
exactly. Now, here's what makes it even more amazing to me, that somehow throughout history that they were able to whitewash this whole thing and make it like it was just a couple kids out in the backyard having a fight. Like when my boys were young, they'd go at it all the time, and they're rolling around. That's no big deal. I can understand it, but somehow we're treating this the same way. And this notion of how we idolize Confederate soldiers and the leaders of the Confederacy. I love this one, but the Alexander Stevenson, the vice president of the Confederacy, who says the Negro is not equal to the white man, and that slavery is natural to his condition. It's like, wait a minute. He literally said the very thing that no one will stand up openly and admit. Very few will stand up and say, yes, I agree with him. Right? Those are the racists that you want. Everybody says with a capital R. Only a capital R racist would ever say something like that. But here we are. We're running around with the flags. We're defending the statues of the people. And I think he summarized the Confederacy notion perfectly well. That, hey, look, God ordained it. Black people are not like us. They're beneath us. And if that isn't the definition of caste, what else do you need? And that's the definition. And it was the epitome of what so many people in the South fought for and believed. And here we are again having this conversation about how much people are fighting back for those monuments. And I think a lot of that is just ignorance. They've wrapped themselves up in the themes that we see in movies like Gone with the Wind that make it seem so heroic, that these are the good guys and they just happen to lose the war, but they're the good guys. Like, okay. All right. Birth of a Nation. We're here to save you. Right? Yeah. They tried. They were valiant in their efforts.
That's what Tangela said. Remember, Letty, that racist thinking is lazy thinking, and you're not doing your if you really believe this, then you're not doing your research. You're just taking things for what they are. And
why wouldn't I? Why? I mean, if I'm someone from the South and I want to just come
dominant caste,
I want to, I've fallen into this belief that, like I said, there have been several chapters we've talked about this before, but if I have fallen into the belief that I am somebody, that I am owed this, right, then I will use any rationalization because I can't come up with a perfect rationalization. So I'll just go with this. This works. It's as good as any. And it becomes that lazy thinking. I don't have to do critical thinking to justify it. Any justification will do. And hey, this is a good one because I am and you aren't. So yeah, all right, there we go. Next. Yeah. Oh, we could just move on. Yeah. So I look at that and I just think, just to have that knowledge that this is, someone who was the vice president of the Confederacy had that belief. Wow. Imagine if any leader of America now, the United States, ever voiced this belief, the immediate outrage and backlash. Where was that all these years ago, and why doesn't it exist now? And I think it just comes down to, Richard, what you said, just this lazy thinking. I'm not aware of it, and if I were aware, I'd think differently. So I think this is just, again, I love this part of the conversation.
So this what you're saying right now about the awareness is something that is prevalent in Germany, right? They're trying to learn from their lessons. They want everyone to be aware that we're not going to hide behind, history. We're not going to say it was just one person and people back then and whatever the excuses are that you could very well use, because they could be the same excuses now, right? We're not rounding people up, all that kind of thing. So the memorials that she talks about, and maybe someone will sponsor a trip for all of us to go to Germany and look at all these monuments someday. But there are these memorials all over. They're all over Germany, and they're talking about Berlin. I think it was in Berlin where they're talking about different art installations, state-sanctioned things that are put in place around people's homes, office buildings. That one art installation where you could see where the buildings come to a stop, and then there's a memorial to people that were killed, and names and dates and all of these things, and it's just there for everyone to see. And I love that the plaques that are put into the cobblestone streets or the sidewalks are called stumble. You're going to stumble on them, right? The stumble stones.
Yep.
It's just like a constant reminder, and it's not no one is running up and down the street screaming at people, don't let this happen. It's just there so that you don't forget. We love to talk about never forgetting here in America, but we forget. 5 seconds later, we're talking about something else. But I like when
I love what you're saying, and I was going to add this real quick and jump back out again. We want to forget the stuff that we feel ugly about. We feel yucky.
Yeah.
We can't really defend it. That's the stuff that we always say, no, we want to forget about that. I was just out in DC this summer, and one of the places I did finally get to go see was the 9/11 memorial at the Pentagon. Beautiful, touching. It was all about the victims. There you go. That was it. It was victims. Whereas, same thing in here. But I think about the Confederate statues and things. It's like, whoa, that's a monument to the persecutors. How odd would it be? What would the outrage sound like if the monuments were now changed, and instead of the 9/11 memorials for the victims, we had 9/11 memorials to those who perpetrated that atrocity? It's never going to happen. But again,
can you imagine saying, this is part of our history, we have to make sure their pictures are up on the wall, and oh my God.
But we do that. And I was thinking about that when you mentioned President Johnson and talking about what we do with kids just in the link of presidents going across our nation's history. The 45, we talk about, just memorize these names and these war heroes. We don't even talk about what they did, the atrocities some of them committed and those kinds of things. We just look, these are all our heroes. And then we just keep adding one on to another, but let's not talk about their legacy. And that legacy sometimes is awful and ugly. And we don't allow anybody to bring that up within our schools. To talk about Johnson and granting clemency to Confederate soldiers just like that, and saying, okay, and raise up one. As a matter of fact, let's start looking at the heroes on the Confederate side. That's bizarre thinking. Why did he do that? And even the fact that Lincoln, I will tell you, we bring up, but every time we bring up, the history of Lincoln, and then, Lincoln's relationship with slaves, and then we talk about, Washington, George Washington, I get uncomfortable. I admit that my heart goes, no, these were heroes, because it was ingrained in me that these are heroes, rather than just let's speak truth. There were some heroic things done, but don't forget, there was ugliness of the time, and we should be embarrassed. And as Germany says, we don't want to forget.
Perfect.
Yeah. This is, you're not going to like this, but this happens all, the whole idea of caste and religion I mean, this is the Catholic Church, right? We're talking about the Catholic Church. We could easily be saying this about Catholics defending the Catholic Church and ignoring everything and almost pretending like it had to be that way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are today. That's kind of like the mentality of to me, the fact that people are not walking out of Catholic churches every week or just not ever showing up is outrageous. And people will say, you know what? You don't want to talk about the Spanish Inquisition? Fine. It was a long time ago. But how about, yesterday or last week or last year? It's to me, it's the same shit. It's the same shit, just covered in other kind of shit. Okay.
The opinions of our host, represented by the host, are only the opinions of our host.
Yes. I want to get back to, because these conversations that we can have with current generations, future generations, and this is what we hope people will try to pass on to their kids. So he's talking about I think it was college students, and kind of asking them the question about the responsibility of Germans in general, generation to generation, after the Holocaust, and how much do you accept responsibility? Should we all be should we all feel guilty generationally? Is this a thing? And even again, when I was reading it through again, this one paragraph where they kind of start to say like, well, they did it and it wasn't us.
Yeah.
But then that shift to kind of say, but we accept responsibility of being able to say that happened and we want to make sure it doesn't happen. And then this phrase that we need to be the guardians of truth. This is simple. This is simple. If you really care about the truth, then you just say it. You don't have to make up stories. You don't have to pretend and remember about what you forgot to say last time so that it doesn't get out that you told a secret or that you said something wrong about a person. This is why we tell kids not to lie, right? Because you can't keep up with the story. So this idea that in Germany, students are being asked to think about it, to kind of engage in that way, think about what generational guilt might look like, and accepting responsibility, and how lovely it was to kind of think that maybe my kid, his like high school kids now and college kids now, students now, they're all kids, can kind of say, I want to be able to say that I know the truth and that I'm sharing the truth and that I'm not perpetuating any lies about who we are as people, because we're a great nation and we should celebrate that regardless of what has happened and what is happening now. How do you guys feel about
kids? When I'm working with youth, I'm working with high school students, I'm working with college students, they are the guardians of truth now. They're fine with it. They don't have a problem. It is literally the only people I ever run into who have a problem are the parents. And it's this interesting thing that we have with kids that when they find out the truth and they challenge. I found out truth when I was a kid, and I'd look at my grandmother or my mom, and I'd challenge for a second and they'd bristle. Like, oh, how could you question me on that? Because I'm a kid. I've got a question. I'm curious. It's a natural process. And we beat it out of kids. Right? We shame them for asking about the truth or for questioning instead of just following blindly. Now, here's what I'm excited about, because we're, everything in education now, we're moving towards critical thinking skills. And critical thinking involves the ability to analyze what's in front of you, not just, rote education where I learned, like Richard and I, when dinosaurs roamed the planet, we learned that, you name the presidents and you name what the founding fathers did for America, and you get a good grade and off you go. We never were allowed to challenge those thoughts. And now here we are really starting to challenge people on how they think and their critical reasoning behind it. Kids get it, critical thinking. It's the older folks, right? My generation has no clue what critical thinking means. And I pick on my generation, again, 1964, I'm the last baby boomer, and I will pick on us as much as I want to, and I don't care what anybody else says. It was baby boomers who bought into this notion just a few weeks ago that John F. Kennedy Jr. was coming back from the dead. He staged his own death, and they show up on Daily Plaza because they're waiting. And Daily Plaza, they're waiting to see, here he comes driving by, and there's video of all these people, and not a single one looks like they're in their 40s. They all look like they're my age and older. And so I know public education, we take a lot of the brunt for, a lot of the blame for everything. I now know why. Okay. Because my generation, public education failed us somehow. But the younger people seem to be doing pretty good. I didn't see any 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds out there on Daily Plaza because they were looking to see, hey, I hear John F. Kennedy Jr. faked his death. I wonder what he looks like now. None of them were out there. It was all of us really, really bright people from 1964 and beyond who, maybe there were some 1965, 1966 babies in there too. But the bottom line was, it wasn't the young people who we villainize. We beat them up every time they have an opinion. And what's interesting is I'm looking at it now, and most of the time, their opinions are actually pretty good. They may not have it all together, but their opinions are pretty good. And we talk about them, we berate them by just simply saying, oh, wait, aren't you the kids that were eating Tide Pods a couple months ago? Now I'm supposed to listen to you? Yes, they were eating Tide Pods. So what? That wasn't everybody in the school. That was like, just like when I was a kid in school, out of 100, there are 5 kids who will test some things and do some things that are incredibly stupid. That doesn't mean that the rest of the 95 were not that bright, because I'm pretty sure my generation, it was like half of them that would have shown up to eat Tide Pods. Because again, I look at this age, if you're in your 50s and 60s and you still think John F. Kennedy is coming back, oh, you would have been eating more than a Tide Pod. All right, let's be honest about that. So I'm already nervous about you because you've had all this experience and you still don't have the ability to think critically. And that worries me. Kids don't vote, but us old folks do. And we're the ones easily duped. So I think Guardians of the Truth is fantastic. I love that notion, because that is the effort that I see them undergoing, that they love their friends and family, and they look around and they don't know why this should even be a controversy. So I have some hope for the future, because our young people today, they're questioning, how could you ever be so blind, grandma, grandpa, great grandma, grandpa? How could my ancestors be so blind as to believe in this stuff? And I'm like, yes, thank you. And it makes me a little embarrassed to go, ooh, and like Richard ever said, it took us about 6-7 years ago to start to think, why are we so enamored with these Confederate statues? I don't get it now. So hopefully the young folks figure it out a whole lot faster than us old people.
So we're going to use Guardians of Truth when we make t-shirts. I think that'll be a cool thing.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a copyright infringement. We'll have to find out. But what you're saying about who's making the decisions, who's voting, it kind of leads into the next chapter. So we'll just switch to this idea of democracy on the ballot. And there were only a couple of things I wanted to pull out of this. One, and we talked about this last week, the 2042 idea. She kind of introduced it in the last couple of chapters, and talked about, who's paying attention to that and how outraged people are. And just for those of you who don't know or aren't reading or haven't been paying attention, the year 2042 is supposed to be the year that there's a shift in population. This is all about census data. Enough of a shift in the population of the United States that white people will not be the majority population anymore. This is the projection. And I don't know when this, I don't know if it's in there, or Mike, if you know, I forgot to look it up, when these numbers came out.
2008.
Was it 8?
2008 is, yeah. I looked it up because I needed to read more.
Well, it's an interesting thing that in 2008 they're projecting out, and that in 2008 people would be responding to that.
Yeah.
While Barack Obama is campaigning for president. I mean, the idea, right? They're taking over. They are taking over.
I think this for me.
Do you know more about Mike? Are you?
Well, I've got two thoughts that come to mind for me. One of them is the joke. Chris Rock made the joke that no one in America, no white person in America would ever want to trade places with him. And he said, and I'm rich. Right. And still no one wanted to trade places with them. And I think it ties back to that notion of that's kind of been weaved through our minds in the birth of a nation, that you should expect retribution. That the folks who have been slaves all these years, if we free them, you should be concerned about retribution. We're either barbarians or we're buffoons. We're full of jokes, or you just have to guard all of the white women and all of your property and things, because the blacks are going to exasperate their revenge upon us. And that's where I think some of that notion of, between democracy or whiteness, I choose whiteness. I think that's because there's this fear that's still being built up. I mean, we really are a nation that we do make a lot of decisions based on scarcity versus abundance. And so we've always fought and hoarded whatever is ours. It's mine. No one else gets it. And I think that for a lot of folks, in the back of their minds, there is this thought, and I hear it now, the way the belief is espoused now is that's not the way we do things here in our country. Those people who are coming over here think they're going to change us and make it all about them. Well, that's what happens when cultures start to merge and blend. You get a little bit different opinion based on someone else's experience. Settle down. It doesn't mean that they're going to, everything's going to become a socialist, Marxist, whatever. No, there's elements of all types of political elements mixed in there. But for me, this notion comes down to the fear of it's going to cost me something when I become the minority. And I believe my junior psychology hat says it's based on what they have actually seen or witnessed other minorities, how they are treated. And there is this disconnect that, well, wait a minute, what if I become the minority? Are they going to come after me? Do I now experience the same things that they've experienced? Because I don't like what I'm fine that they had to experience it. They should get over it. But I don't want to experience that. And whenever the nation becomes uncomfortable and suffers like those who are incredibly poor, that's when we have outrage. I'm a good person. I've worked hard on my life. Why should I be unemployed? I'm not lazy like the other people. And it's like, hang on, all these disconnects are amazing. But I think that's part of it, is they are now fearful that the way they have treated, and I'm being loose with the term they, but the fear is that they have been very challenged by the way, they've watched other people be treated, and they are now fearful that they will also be treated that way, even though there's the argument that it really isn't that bad and it's just your imagination. So I think this is really about fear of what will happen to me when I am now in their shoes, because I've been watching what's happening to them. And it's and if that's truth, I don't want to visit that. I don't want to be in that position. Oh, goodness gracious. I should be very nervous. Yeah, you should be.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's interesting that you say that about like that constant hypocrisy, right? The whole racism isn't happening. Stop bitching about it. But also, I don't want to be a minority and experience racism. But we're like, but we're cool, right? Everything's fine. So you have no problem being a minority in this country. It's going to be fun. You're going to have all the same access to all the same things. It's going to be great.
And exactly why they get nervous.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
Oh no, I agree with Mike. I just think that it's the even reading some of the articles, and then I think it was like the New York Times that this article first came out, and then people started reacting to it, and then reading some of those reactions, there's more fear. Like, oh, suddenly, is this the time that the we have to pay the piper when in 2042? Is that what's happening? And so you can read that fear in some of these. It's like, what the heck are you talking about? Like,
yes,
your mind.
We have a clock. There's an atomic clock. Is that what it's called? The atomic clock.
It keeps track of the dead.
And so there's another clock. It's the 2042 clock, and it's ticking. And there's one in every Latino, Asian, and Black person in the United States has one, and they're in our living room. Yeah. And we're just counting down. Apple has provided us with.
That's hilarious. Maybe we ought to. Yeah, you ought to design one and sell it. I think that would sell.
Shut up.
42 clock.
Yeah, I'm gonna enter it into my countdown clock here on my phone to 2042. I have retirement in here, but I'm taking that thing out. Retirement's nothing. I need to look at the count up to the leading into 2042.
Yeah, we're gonna have we'll have a New Year's Eve party at the end of 2041, and just wait. You just wait. Okay. But okay, so I know we're joking and all that, but this idea, it kind of leads into our next chapter, because we wouldn't even have to have these conversations if we weren't already paying this price, right? The price is that we're not comfortable. We can't live comfortable lives. Those of us that are constantly worrying about these things, if for ourselves or for our fellow human beings. I like this phrasing of this, that it's a less benevolent society. And it doesn't mean you're giving anything up. That I think that's the idea. We talk about this a lot, that, when you start to feel like someone else is gaining on you, you feel like you're losing out, you're missing out. This is, people vote this way. They move their kids around school districts this way. They move from state to state this way. But it's more about the humanity. So this, in places with different history, so we could look around the world, and hierarchy, it's not necessarily seen as taking away from one's own property if the system looks out for the needs of everyone. Richard and I were talking about the elderly, I don't know, last night or the night before. We're talking about high school kids or 18-year-olds being treated a certain way, even though at this point we know there's evidence that the brain is not fully developed until well into your 20s, right? But we still are forcing 18-year-olds to act a certain way and do certain things, and they have to join the military, and because I have a son, so we're having that conversation. But then also the elderly, and why there isn't a better system in place to deal with people who are aging, what the rules are. If we know that certain things are happening at certain ages, like losing eyesight, or better tests for something like that, cognitive tests for who's behind the wheel, things like that. Because we should be giving, I don't know why I'm cussing so much today. We should be giving a shit about how we treat people, but also in our systems, how people are making their way through their life and how it's impacting a community and our society. And how if we put those systems in place, it's taking away from someone else instead of just saying we're going to be a more benevolent society.
We can't do that. We cannot be, because this goes back to what I said earlier. We have this odd fight with this notion of scarcity and abundance. There is plenty of abundance out there, but we don't see it that way. And it's partly because we've bought into the notion that the way to make it in this country is just to get out and go do work. Singular. You're the singular, not as part of the team necessarily, unless the team is critical to our sports. Otherwise, we talk about business, not in terms of teams. We still talk about business as though it's the single person who can show up and save the company, the one politician who can show up and save the country. We have this notion that it's about the Messiah who's going to come and save any part of our society. And the truth is, no. I think anytime I hear someone say, I'm a self-made fill in the blank, I always think, wow, how can you be so incredibly disrespectful to all the people who poured themselves into your life to get you to wherever you are? We are the most dependent mammals on the planet. The other mammals are on their own within months. My 2-year-old grandson still hasn't figured out how to change his own diaper. He's now learning how to drop his pull-ups so he can go potty. Right? He's got that part down, but that usually requires some reminders. Hey, you might want to go now. And he'll look up and go, okay. Or he'll go, no, he wants to finish. But he's not able to take care of himself. He's 2. Can't do it yet, right? My 5 and 6-year-olds, and they can't do it fully. I'm a little concerned that my 16-year-old grandson, who I love dearly, he's going to be leaving home someday. Oh my God, I hope he's ready. Yeah. And he's fine. We all figure it out. But it's this notion of that if you can't do it on your own, there's something wrong with you. So we're all about survival. I'll just take care of mine. I got mine. You good luck to you. And we do that because we think there's only so much pie. Every time the pie gets divided, every time somebody else gets part of it, it means the pie must have shrunk. Never mind that the economy grows almost every year. Here we are coming out of this most amazing pandemic and economic upheaval. Stock market is still growing. Wages are actually growing. Never mind the fact that we've got a shortage of employees. The reason we've got challenges in the world with the economics is because inflation is growing faster than we can keep up with. Well, that means somewhere someone is gaining. So there's all of this growth that consistently happens, but we still come back to this conversation about, well, there's only so much. And if you get, I must lose. So when I have conversations with people around equity, their real big concern is, well, what is it going to cost me to help those people? It's always the same conversation. Well, what am I going to lose to help those people? And we talk about it on a national discourse by talking about, well, my taxpayer dollars are going to feed those poor. And if they would just get off their butts and do, it's like, hey, stop. The trickle money that you put into the tax system, it ain't nothing. No, that's not even budget dust that comes out of your pocket. So settle down. You pay $2,000 in your taxes or $5,000, whatever it was. Yeah, that really, that solved all the problems in the world there. That $5,000. I don't know why we have poverty anymore. You kidding? I don't get, but we get worked up over that. And this funny thing is that you don't solve problems like poverty by taking from those who have to give it to those who don't. You just figure out, oh, congratulations, you got yours taken care of. Good. Go about your business. We need to help take care of these folks who don't have. So that's what we're trying to problem solve. And no, we're not trying to take your money, but if you got a little extra, you can help us out. That would be good because it makes it that much better. But we don't. Instead, we get locked up on, well, what's it going to cost me? Well, I had to work today. Oh, yeah, okay. That's what you're supposed to do. So why not?
It's a misunderstanding though, right? Of the way the system actually works, because we have these conversations about how the rich aren't taxed or they don't pay their fair share. I mean, we could talk about that because we know that it's true. There's no reason why, Jeff Bezos and Amazon as a corporation can't contribute more. And so because they have, and I'm going to say they have created a system of scarcity that we all live that way because that's part of the system of caste. And if you start explaining this to people, they really only feel what they're feeling in the moment, and their loss of those thousands of dollars that they had to pay in their taxes because they're feeling it in the moment because they have needs and I'm saying this instead of thinking about what the rich are not paying, because it's really difficult to understand how much money that is.
I have zero concept.
We cannot fathom how much money could be put into the economy, could be put into our social programs if we actually got the money that they're supposed to be paying. We can't even, it's like space. We can't even comprehend it. So it's hard to have that conversation. I think that maybe this idea that maybe some of us pay attention, the indicators of quality of life among leading countries in the world were lagging behind. These statistics come out all the time. They talk about it in the news. You hear people talking about it at work. The statistics are out all the time, and it's like we don't really pay attention to that because we're so much. It's like you're being anti-patriotic. It's another one of those moments, right? If you don't think the US is 100% the best country in the world, regardless of how many kids are starving while they're sitting in a classroom in the United States, it doesn't matter. Like, stop talking crap about the US. Even though
part of it. That's a part of it.
Yeah. What are we going to do?
Think of it this way. Think of it this way before you shut the show down and go run out and protest. I think it comes back to, because what we're doing is, again, I'm going to go back to Richard and I as old guys on the show here. We've been steeped in the belief that this is the greatest country ever. Again, I actually still believe that we've got some great opportunities here. I'm not ready to pack up and leave. I'm not the guy who's going to badmouth the country. I have a kid who's overseas right now fighting and defending for our country. So I'm in. I got it. No problem whatsoever. What I think is interesting is that when we get the part of that wokeness, part of the outrage comes from when we look around and we go, wait a minute, it's not fair. My mother, my grandfather, all these people who gave their lives and did all this, gave up body parts for the wars and everything else. I look at that, and that's when we start to have moments of outrage. And then we go back to, yeah, but it must be something that they did, because I've got to believe in the American dream, which says if I just do all this hard work, I will someday get there. And that's because we've been sold that thing by the upper part of the caste that has that power. And they have, I'm with you. I would love to someday have a $2 million tax bill, right? I would have no problem with that whatsoever, because that means I had to make more buckets of money than I will ever fold in my life to have a $2 million tax bill. Well, if there's some cool things that you like, there's more money than I'm ever going to spend. I would love to be like Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, who says, yeah, I'm just like, I'll never live off of all this stuff. I can't. So let's just start giving it away to whatever charity. Let's look at that. I have a friend who talks about that. Now, he's very religious, and he calls it God's circle of money. And he said he was told one day when he started getting involved in business, we had a friend who said, look, draw a circle, and inside of that circle, think of everything you want to have represented in your life, cars, homes, whatever. He said, put it in there and put a dollar figure on it, and then ask God to bless it. And he said he got blessed because God started to put money in there and it overflowed. And he said, whatever falls outside of your original circle belongs to God. You're responsible for that as a steward of his money. So he said what he and his wife love to do is they sit down secretly and they figure out who in their church, because they're part of a church. He said they figure out who in the church is suffering and they're struggling. What? Old lady Munson, she has a transmission went out on her car. You know she can't afford that. Let's write a check to pay for it. That's what they do with that other money that's God's money. And I love the way they do that. And I'm trying to teach myself how to do that. God just hasn't quite filled my circle yet. He's like, don't worry, I'll get to you in a little bit. Right? But it's still this wonderful thing of where that's a true Christianity. So when we get to this point where you're making this money, we have this disconnect that says, well, wait a minute, I don't have enough. And I don't know at what point the mind says, stop that. You have more than you will ever need for the rest of your life. Congratulations, you're good. Give the rest of it away. And we're just not quite there yet. And I would like to think that the more we mature, the more we become intellectual, the more we start to realize that we're all in this thing together. And I think climate is trying to teach us that lesson right now, undeniably. Every time I turn on the news, there's another story about climate and the impact of no snow whatsoever. Here we are in December, and there are no ski resorts. There are like 3 of them open in the Tahoe area because they are far enough in elevation that they can still make their snow. But every place else, it's grass and rocks and boulders, and nobody's skiing. And so climate is going to teach us we're all on this marble together, whether we like the lesson or not that we're learning. And it's the same thing with money. It's the same thing. Like, hey, look, if we figure out ways to take care of those who don't have, and if some of it is about money and we get those resources there, congratulations. They now need less of my $5,000 taxes. They don't need that money all of a sudden. Well, I can stop whining and stop being an old guy. Yeah, back when I had to earn this, settle down, Grandpa. That's why I think we will get there eventually, but it's just going to take such a long time because we have to continue to move further and further from the indoctrination we received as small children growing up that, hey, as long as you're willing to do the work, you can be whatever you want in this country. And we kind of know that's a nice story. That's a nice fairy tale.
It does seem to be happening a little bit faster, though, don't you think? I feel like from Gen X to millennial to Gen Z, and then this, what is it, Alpha that's coming, right? I mean, those switches in ideologies or more values or whatever seem to be changing a little bit faster. Maybe because more questions are being asked. And I know that, like, for me, Gen X is like, we asked questions, but nobody gave us answers or, kicked us out and closed the door. And we were like, fine, I'm just going to go smoke in the parking lot then. But like these younger, they're like demanding answers and they want to know they not even demanding answers, demanding action, I should say.
Yes, they're demanding action,
What
and
are
in a
you
lot
going
of
to do
cases,
about it?
well, in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
they are actually doing. They're just saying, no, we're going to do something. And again, I know I've mentioned this before, but to have a young man who I know a young man who made an amazing amount of money because of software work that he did and sold it off to Google, and then turned around and started a security firm because of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and just said, this is crazy. I'm putting my money where my heart is. And I think this is, again, I keep looking at this, and I tell folks all the time, we're having more and more socialpreneurs, these folks who are trying to figure out how to make money and solve a social entrepreneurial problem. And they're doing some amazing things out there, stuff that never would have occurred to me in my 20s or 30s. I'm in my 50s, and it barely occurs to me sometimes. Like, hey, this would be a great opportunity to, I got no time for that. I got to get back to what I'm already doing. And I talk myself out of it. But it's still, this is what I see from young people today. And I've told people before, look, stop beating up on millennials. Millennials are a lot like the greatest generation. We talk about those folks who were in World War II, and they laugh at me and I go, hang on. These millennials are trying to figure out how do they problem solve, and with action, like you said, ladies, not just about conversation anymore. It's about, look, let's get to action. Let's get to work and solve the problem, because they are frustrated that those of us who are older, who are in charge, we aren't doing anything. We're just busy fighting about what everybody else should have done. And off to the battles we go, because again, we go fighting for what's ours. Hey, look, this is mine. Go, you young people, go get your own. You millennials. No, the millennials
Which
are
is
just out doing
crazy, because who raised those millennials? It
it.
wasn't me.
Millennials
Who
are tired of the hypocrisy.
raised those millennials?
Yep.
And you talked about the climate change, this global pandemic, this idea about how, and I think it kind of really showed the fragilities of globally where we're at in terms of sharing information and sharing resources. If you want to look at it globally, we failed in a lot of ways, but definitely in the US, we weren't ready to help each other. We just were not ready to help the people who needed it, even though we all required that those people keep doing the jobs that they were doing. So that system of support.
Well, see, and I think our system of support is fantastic when we see the bad guys show up on our land. The bad guys, think about it, every time the bad guys show up and they're in costume, they've got the turban or they've got the whatever hats, they're in costume. We bond together immediately. But when it's the economy, or when it's the pandemic, virus sneaking around, we don't know who's got the virus, so everyone is a bad guy. We just don't support one another. We go crazy. But if you put the enemy right square in front of us, I always think about the WWE back in the early days. Hulk Hogan, he'd come in and he'd fly the flag, and here comes the Sheik of Iran, and he fly his flag. Characters are easy to see. We all gather together. Everyone in the arena boos the Sheik of Iran, and everybody cheers for Hulk Hogan. That's how we are. If we can see the enemy, we pull together just like that. If we're not sure who the enemy is, but it's costing us something, the economy is going down, and somebody else has a job, even if I don't know if that's the bad guy, I look over there and I go, look, they got my job that I should be doing. No, actually, technology got your job. But you can go ahead and blame those people if you want to, because we're always looking for the villain. And if we don't know the answer, we'll make one up, and it's always those people over there. They are the ones, the reason why I'm a hardworking individual. They're the reason why I'm starving. And that's what the global pandemic, and I thought it just did a fantastic job of just really exposing us to this notion of the ones who are on the bottom of the pole. You get no thoughts, no choices. You still need to go to work to keep the rest of us happy and in our homes and comfortable. But go to work. Yeah, I thought, wow, that's just crazy stuff.
Yeah, this I like the at the very end when she pulls in information, a little bit of a quote from this scholar, Gary Michael Tartikoff. He says a couple of things about this country being built on caste, and that it feels like we're always searching for our humanity. You know, the same thing that you're saying about coming together when there's an obvious threat to everyone, because that's when we say we're in this together. But then when you look maybe state level, and then, you know, county level, and then township level, there may be the same kind of moments where you band together to help each other. But for the most part, the breakdown is that the government doesn't run that way, because that's not how it was built. And because this civilization, the US, was built the way it was, it just feels like we're always constantly searching for that. You know, we're fundraising to help the homeless. We rally around people when there's a tragedy in their home, or at church. People rally around people. At schools, we rally around the people in the school, like the school shooting that just happened. We rally. But when it comes down to actually changing the system that helped create that problem, no. It's like, no, that problem, they created that problem. That mom and that dad and that kid, they're the problem, and that's it. And the rest of us are like, what? The humanity.
Yeah.
And that's why I love the program. So I'm going to be, the reason I'm still down here, like I said, I've been here for a couple weeks, or a week or so, and I'm going to be in for a couple more days. The program that I'm going to be leading with the high school students, at the end of each day, those high school students will find, and I tell people this all the time, they find humanity. My job is just to get them to tell their story. And I got a lot of fun ways to tell their story. And then there's one way where there's no talking that goes on at all. And they start to really understand the depths of what other people have gone through in the gym. So out of 150, 200 kids, they start to realize the story, and they look around and they go, oh my God, Richard, I thought you had everything perfect because of, I see you come to school, you've got a car, you've got all this stuff, and I don't. And I always thought you had a perfect world. But man, I watched you tell your story today, and I realized, wow, you got problems just like I do. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even trade you my problems for yours. You keep yours. All right? But I'd love to support you. Right? They always figure it out. And I go, how many of you, now that you know someone else's story, you have that much more humanity and you want to champion them and cheer for them? And all these hands go up. And it's just this amazing thing that starts to show up, that when we know each other's story, oh, come on up. When we know each other's story, I'll let you know when I'm somewhere near Bakersfield. I promise you, you will know immediately. And I want you there. Because at the end of the day, you just look at these kids, and I've had the adults in the room again. I always tell them, by the end of the day, you're going to know why you love some kids and why you need to love some kids a whole lot more. Never a dry eye leaving the house when we're done. And the adults in the room get it. And since you're already cussing, I had one adult who I brought with me. And by the end of the day, she said, the kids just loved on her. The bell has rung. Everyone has disappeared, but her group of 10 kids, they won't leave her alone. They're still hugging and loving her, trying to get fun. You should be a part of our. And I'm like, hey, you want to come join us? Because we want to finish this conversation as the adults, because I got to get on the road. I got to call. So she comes over and joins us and said, so what did you think of the day? And she said, I don't know how the F, see, I'm not going to actually cuss and say fuck. I don't know how the F these kids get up in the morning with their life as it is.
Seriously.
And they still come to school every day. And she said, just the knowing of that, I want to double down and do more for them. And that's the same conversation kids have when they recognize what each other is going through. They also double down and they say, look, I don't care where I'm at in school. If you see me and you got somebody you need to talk to and you spot me, pull me aside. I cut class, I sit, and I just listen to you. That's humanity, about just being there for each other. And these kids get it. They support each other and they do things all the time. I had somebody tell me just the other day, one of the schools I just at, the very next day, there were 3 kids that were standing in line trying to buy tickets for the winter formal. And they realized one of their classmates didn't have the money and just said, that's okay, I won't go. They let her walk away. And then they turned to the lady who was like, hey, we all pulled together. We got the money. We're buying the ticket for her, just so they could surprise her with that. And that's just because they realize they're all the gain they get from that, the opportunity to just love on each other just because they exist, not because someone did something great for them, but just because you exist, you're in my world. And I think that's the humanity that Tartikoff talks about that we're really looking for, is how do we get back to that place? And we're, like I said, we're incredibly good when we see the enemy and we know the enemy is the enemy. We take care of each other. But the second we can't tell what it is, our minds go to work. We make up some enemy, and we can't come up with a good answer. So we just come up with any answer, and it's that guy over there or that person who has a job that I used to have. And I know there's no way he's had that job as long as I had it before. So he must have just stolen it from me, you know. And like the ultimate that I still hear is that I still hear people from time to time tell me, yeah, but the only reason you people of color are getting those jobs is because of, and then fill in the blank with some sort of tokenism. Right? It's only because, you know, we got to have you in that place. Otherwise, you stole that job from somebody else. It's like, really? Here we are, 2021.
Same damn story.
Still doing it
over and over again.
Over and over.
Same story over and over again.
And it comes down to scarcity.
Richard, did you
the
have
only reason I lost it? So go for it.
No, I was agreeing because I'm sitting here thinking as life goes on within our country, how we have our ups and downs, but Mike is right that we're always looking that when something happens like the COVID-19 virus and the pandemic, that we do start pointing fingers. Where's the evil person in all this? Not just realizing this is a virus that's spreading. You know, there doesn't have to be one evil person in all this. We have to protect ourselves. What are we doing right at this moment to protect ourselves? And then you start watching the mutation of this virus and realize, you know, mutations of viruses used to happen over a long period of time. These mutations are happening in very short sequences and coming up with brand new viruses, basically. And that is the amazing thing about what's happening now. And you know, I speculate sometimes that this does have to do with global warming, but we're not talking about the connection between the two because we're basically becoming this big, huge incubator that grows viruses and bacteria. And this is our future. This is what we got right now. And so we do have to stop pointing fingers and start looking at solutions. And I think that the price we pay as it goes is that we're all not going to survive unless we throw down, you know, these strange things that we've developed in respecting and you know, putting people up on a pedestal that don't need to be there, and get them out of the way so that we all can start thinking about these solutions. And you know, because we're all going to lose in the end. And I think Mike has talked about this before, and I just, it is extreme. As I become more aware of it, I'm extremely frustrated because I'm like, we're not going to survive. I start doubting. Mike's got hope. I start doubting. I'm trying to. But the more I learn, the more I'm going, holy crap, we're never gonna survive this stuff. But you know, I'll have hope, you know, different day. Waiting for 2042 so things can turn around.
Maybe we can read a comedy next time.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't. Maybe it won't be this. Or no. I'll save that for next time. Okay. I've already said too much. People are gonna come after me. Okay. So this is good. Kind of being able to leave these chapters on that humanity note. It was at the end of chapter 29, and I think it was great. We started talking about the symbols of caste and how prevalent they are, and the backlash when you start saying, why is that statue there? Why is that school named that way? I mean, just recently we had a high school here in Kern County renamed because they were the rebels and their mascot was like an actual rebel. It was insane. And people were pissed. So it's still happening. It's going to keep happening. And I'm glad that change was made, and hopefully that's happening across the United States without too much trouble in school environments. But I know that 2018 wasn't that long ago, and that whole Charlottesville thing was happening because of a statue that was in that town, and the city was trying to take it down, and that's why they were there. That's initially why they were there. So definitely watch Outrage on Netflix.
Already to put it in on my list. I'm ready to watch.
Good. You might not want to watch it before bed because you probably won't be able to sleep.
Okay.
next week, we're going to wrap up the book. It's going to be week 15, and chapters 30 and 31 are the last official chapters, and then there's an epilogue. And I kind of crammed all the different ideas together. The first chapter talks about the radicalization of the dominant caste, and then radical empathy is mentioned later. So I was sort of thinking, how do we get through the radicalization of the dominant caste to radical empathy so that there is action in the words that like we're talking about now, and where we're not just saying we feel a certain way or that we feel a certain way, but that there are actions behind it to help make some of these changes. And she gives examples of that. And Keith Woolridge and London McBride will help wrap that up next week. And then it'll be Christmas and everything will be fine. All the problems will be solved.
Was that the gift? Was that the gift you asked for Santa to send to you to get it all finally straightened out? Because I want that. I want that gift too.
Oh, we got a goodbye message. Thank you, Carol Lucas, for listening in and following our conversation. How do I? Okay. All right. So we'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us tonight and following along with the book. I know you're passionate about these things, so it's always great to have your very hopeful opinions shared here with us as we trash everything.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It has been my pleasure. I'm looking forward to the next book, a little bit shorter. So next time I say something about a really long book, ignore me. Just ignore me.
Maybe it'll just be poems. I'll look at my...
It's a great book. So
maybe it'll be a picture book.
Okay, I'm in. I'm in.
Awesome. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, and we'll see everybody next week.
All right.
Good.
Take care.